But you know, there's no accounting for love, is there? That's the trouble. And you can choose someone nice, and then I do think we tell a lot of very bad stories about love.
Emma Thompson has 2 Oscars, a knighthood, and a reputation as one of the sharpest women in Britain. But behind that career was a heartbreak so brutal, she once said any sense of being lovable had vanished completely. The man she adored betrayed her with one of her own peers. And yet, the most surprising part is not the betrayal. It is the man who believed a psychic, chased the wrong woman, and put her shattered heart back together. The golden couple of British acting. To understand how badly Emma Thompson's heart was broken, you first have to understand how high she was flying when it happened. Because before Greg Wise, before the healing, there was Kenneth Branagh, and for a while, they were the most celebrated couple in British acting. Emma and Kenneth first met in 1987 on the set of a World War II television drama called Fortunes of War. The connection was immediate and powerful. They were both brilliant, both ambitious, both madly in love with the craft of acting. Their romance moved fast, and just 2 years later, in 1989, they married. The wedding was a star-studded affair near London, with guests reportedly including the likes of Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, and Judi Dench. And then they became a phenomenon. Emma and Kenneth were not just a married couple, they were a creative powerhouse. They starred in films together, several of which Kenneth directed, and audiences absolutely adored them. Fans and the press affectionately nicknamed them the Ken and Em Show. They were Britain's answer to Hollywood royalty, 2 gifted actors who seemed to have it all: the love, the talent, the success. Everything they touched seemed to turn to gold, and for a time, they could do no wrong in the eyes of the public. But that fame came with a strange pressure. The 2 of them became so linked in the public's mind that they started to feel like they were losing their own individual identities. At one point, they even refused to do interviews together, just to hold on to some sense of themselves as separate people. It was the first small crack in a picture that looked, from the outside, absolutely perfect. And cracks, as Emma would learn, have a way of widening. The cracks begin to show. For several years, the Ken and Em Show rolled on, beloved and seemingly unbreakable. But as the marriage went on, the strain underneath started to surface. And some of it was the ordinary painful stuff that wears down even the strongest couples. Part of it was simply work. Both of them were wildly in demand, constantly pulled in different directions, spending long stretches apart on separate productions. When they eventually announced their split, the official reason they gave was exactly that their careers had kept them separated for long periods of time. It sounded reasonable. It sounded almost gentle. There was also the question of family. Emma has been candid that around this period she felt her biological clock ticking, that she wanted children. But the exhausting pace of their careers left little room for it, and that unfulfilled longing added its own quiet weight to the relationship. In a very Emma way, she even joked darkly about how tired Kenneth was from overwork, the kind of gallows humor people use when something real is hurting underneath. By early 1995, things had reached a breaking point. Emma spent a stretch of time at a health clinic, worn down and exhausted. By one account, when Kenneth came to visit her there, she was so drained and disconnected that she told a fellow patient he might as well not have bothered coming, that all she wanted to do was sleep. That is not the language of a marriage going through a rough patch. That is the language of a marriage that is already, quietly, over. And what Emma did not fully realize yet was why. The betrayal. In 1995, Emma Thompson and Kenneth Branagh announced their divorce. Fans were stunned. The golden couple, the Ken and Em Show, was finished. And the reason they were given, those conflicting work schedules, felt to a lot of people like it did not tell the whole story. They were right. There was much more to it. The year before the divorce, Kenneth had directed and starred in a lavish adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. His co-star, playing his love interest was the acclaimed actress Helena Bonham Carter. And as the two of them worked closely together on that film through 1994, their on-screen chemistry became something very real off-screen. Kenneth was having an affair. For Emma, the discovery was devastating, and what made it worse was how blindsided she was. She has spoken with painful honesty about it in the years since, admitting that she was utterly blind to the fact that her husband was involved with someone else. She said what she learned from the whole ordeal was just how easy it is to be blinded by your own desire to deceive yourself, to not see the thing that is right in front of you because you cannot bear for it to be true. The heartbreak nearly destroyed her. She later described feeling only half alive in the aftermath, saying that any sense of being a lovable or worthy person had gone completely. Think about that. One of the most talented, celebrated women in the country, reduced by betrayal to feeling worthless. It is a reminder that fame and talent are no armor at all against a broken heart. And at her lowest point, Emma Thompson had no idea that her rescue was already being written, on the set of a film she herself was pouring her pain into. The Psychic and the Prophecy. Here is where the story takes a turn so strange it sounds made up. While Emma was quietly falling apart, a man named Greg Wise was being handed a prophecy about her without even knowing her name. Greg Wise was a British actor, and before he began work on a new film, he had a conversation with a psychic friend of his named Helen. And this friend told him something remarkable. She told him that he was going to meet the love of his life, his future wife, on the set of his first big movie. That movie was Sense and Sensibility, the very film Emma Thompson had written the screenplay for, pouring her raw heartbreak into every page, and in which she was also starring. So Greg arrived on that set in 1995, carrying this odd little prophecy in his back pocket. He was primed, almost, to fall in love. There was just one problem. He picked the wrong woman. Greg took one look around the set and decided that the love of his life, his friend had predicted, must be the young, radiant Kate Winslet, who was playing Marianne Dashwood. It made a kind of sense, so he asked Kate out to dinner. And the date was, by all accounts, a complete dud. No spark, no chemistry, just a rather boring evening between two people who were clearly not meant to be. The prophecy, it seemed, had misfired. Except it had not. It had just aimed him at the wrong Dashwood sister, the woman right in front of him. The beautiful twist in this whole story is that the person who finally pointed Greg Wise in the right direction was the very woman he had just taken on that dud of a date, Kate Winslet. Kate, having spent time with Greg and having watched him around the set, saw something he had completely missed. She saw the real chemistry, and it was not between Greg and her. It was between Greg and Emma. So Kate did something wonderful. She told Greg, plainly, that he had it wrong. She pointed out that he and Emma were right for each other, and crucially, she let him know that Emma's marriage was over. The path was clear. He just had not seen it. For Greg, it all suddenly clicked into place. The prophecy was not wrong after all. His psychic friend Helen had told him he would meet his wife on that set. And here she was, the brilliant, wounded, extraordinary Emma Thompson, right in front of him the whole time. It was all meant to be, exactly as Helen had predicted. He had simply needed Kate Winslet to open his eyes, but there was still a mountain to climb, because Emma Thompson was not exactly in a place to fall in love. She was raw. She was grieving. She felt, in her own words, half alive and utterly unlovable. A prophecy and a bit of matchmaking from Kate Winslet were one thing. Convincing a woman whose heart had just been shattered to trust love again was something else entirely. The man who picked up the pieces. Emma Thompson did not fall into Greg Wise's arms overnight. She was still deeply hurt, still processing the wreckage of her marriage. But a few months after her divorce from Kenneth became final, she decided to do the bravest thing a heartbroken person can do. She decided to give love another chance. She agreed to go on a date with Greg, and this time, the prophecy landed exactly where it was supposed to. The connection was real, and it was lasting. Slowly, patiently, Greg Wise did for Emma what she had feared no one ever could. He helped her believe she was worthy of love again. He helped her trust. Years later, Emma summed up her rescue in one of the most moving lines she has ever given about her personal life. She said that two things saved her. Work saved her, and Greg saved her. She said he picked up the pieces and put them back together again. That is the whole story in a single sentence. She had been shattered, feeling like she would never be whole, and this man gently gathered up every broken piece and helped her become herself again. They did not rush to the altar. They dated for around 8 years, in no hurry, building something solid and real. And then, in 2003, Emma Thompson and Greg Wise finally married, in the small Scottish town of Dunoon. The woman who thought her capacity for love had died with her first marriage had found it again, deeper and steadier than before. But their bond was about to be tested and strengthened in ways that had nothing to do with romance. The family they built. Emma and Greg built a family that looks nothing like a typical Hollywood household. And that is exactly what makes it so special. Their daughter, Gaia Wise, was born in 1999, conceived through IVF when Emma was 39 years old. But the story of their second child is the one that truly reveals the kind of people they are. Some years later, the family met a young man named Tindiebwa Agaba, a former child soldier who had fled the horrors of conflict in Africa and arrived in Britain as a refugee alone. They invited him to Christmas dinner, and that invitation turned into something permanent. They adopted him. Tindi became their son. Emma has spoken beautifully about how raising Tindi changed her, opening her eyes to the daily realities that refugees and asylum seekers face, from language barriers to everyday racism to the simple, exhausting struggle to be seen as fully human. She has said that when a person has been othered, when their status and their motives are doubted by the press and by governments, their very humanity gets reduced in other people's eyes. Watching her son navigate all of that became a constant education for her, and Tindi thrived in that loving home. Today, he is married and has built a powerful career as a human rights activist, fighting for refugees and asylum seekers around the world. Emma has said that people like her son take nothing for granted, and that what they offer as citizens is profoundly valuable. It is a family built not on Hollywood glamour, but on open doors and open hearts. And at the center of it is a marriage that works precisely because it refuses to believe in fairy tales. The unromantic secret to lasting love. Here is perhaps the most surprising thing Emma Thompson has ever said about love, and it is the key to understanding why her marriage to Greg has lasted where her first one did not. For a woman in one of the great love stories, Emma is refreshingly, almost brutally, unromantic about romance itself. She has said, quite seriously, that it is philosophically helpful to remember that romantic love is a myth, and even a dangerous one. She believes we have to take the whole idea of it with a massive pinch of salt. Long-term relationships, she insists, are hugely difficult and complicated, and anyone who thinks happily ever after is a real destination is fooling themselves. Coming from someone whose first marriage was destroyed by betrayal, that hard-won realism is not cynicism. It is wisdom. And remarkably, Greg shares that exact same down-to-earth view. When asked the secret to a happy marriage, his answer was simply to keep bloody working at it. No magic, no fairy dust, just effort, day after day. He has also said something that a lot of couples would find surprising, that the secret might be not spending every minute together. He and Emma often spend months apart for work, and rather than letting that distance poison things, they have learned to use it. Greg has joked that they have become very good at plumbing themselves back in after long stretches away from each other. Part of what makes it work is that Greg has never once competed with his wife's enormous fame. He is refreshingly hilariously humble about his own career, once saying that he spent the year after Sense and Sensibility happily working as a builder, which he loved, and cheerfully insisting he is not really an actor at all. He has openly admitted that Emma earns far more than he does, and rather than let that bruise his ego, he simply shrugs and says, "God bless her, let her work." He fills his life with other passions, woodworking, gardening, and is perfectly content to let Dame Emma Thompson take the spotlight. In an industry stuffed with fragile egos, that easy confidence is its own kind of quiet superpower, and it may be the real reason two strong-willed people have lasted so long. That is the real engine of their nearly three-decade love story. Not destiny, not a psychic's prophecy, though that makes a lovely tale, but two clear-eyed people who chose each other, who give each other space, and who simply refuse to stop working at it. Emma even calls her 60s the best decade of her life, the youth of old age, as she puts it. For a woman who once felt half alive, that is a stunning place to arrive. The peace she made. There is one final piece to Emma Thompson's story that shows just how completely she healed, and it is the most graceful part of all. Because the woman who was left half alive by betrayal did not spend the rest of her life bitter. She made peace with everyone. Emma has been open that her heartbreak became fuel for her art. That famous, devastating scene in the film Love Actually, where her character discovers her husband's betrayal and quietly falls apart in the bedroom before pulling herself together to face her children, hit audiences so hard precisely because Emma knew that feeling intimately. She has said she had years of practice at crying in a bedroom and then going out to be cheerful, gathering up the pieces of her heart and putting them in a drawer. She turned her real pain into one of cinema's most relatable moments of quiet heartbreak. And when it comes to Kenneth Branagh and Helena Bonham Carter, Emma reached a place of genuine grace. She has said the whole thing is blood under the bridge, that holding on to that kind of resentment is pointless, and she simply does not have the energy for it. She made peace with Helena years and years ago, even generously calling her a wonderful woman, and joking that perhaps Kenneth loved them both because they were both a little mad and a bit fashion-challenged. In an almost unbelievable twist, all three of them, Emma, Kenneth, and Helena, went on to appear in the Harry Potter films and remained friendly. That is the true measure of how thoroughly Greg Wise healed her heart. Not just that she found new love, but that the old wound stopped hurting entirely. Think about how rare that really is. Most people carry a betrayal like that for the rest of their lives, letting it harden into something bitter that quietly poisons everything after it. Emma did the opposite. She let it go so completely that she could stand beside the very people who hurt her and feel nothing but warmth. She got her happy ending, and she got there without carrying a single ounce of hatred, which is arguably the harder and braver victory of the two. And the life she built on the other side of that pain is genuinely beautiful. These days, she and Greg split their time between London and a home they own in Venice, Italy, a city Emma has long dreamed of living in and where she has even set about learning the language, throwing herself into Italian the way she throws herself into everything. She talks about her 60s as the best decade of her life, full of curiosity and adventure rather than regret. It is the picture of a life fully rebuilt and thriving, a woman who was once too broken to believe she deserved love, now surrounded by it on every side, from her husband, her children, and even the friends who were once part of her deepest wound. So when you look at the whole sweep of it, the shattering betrayal, the strange prophecy, the wrong date with Kate Winslet, the patient healing, and the graceful peace that followed, one thing becomes clear. The psychic was right, Kate Winslet was right, and Emma Thompson, against all the odds of her own broken heart, ended up exactly where she was always meant to be. Emma Thompson was shattered by a betrayal that left her feeling worthless, and a man who believed a psychic put her back together. Nearly 30 years later, she calls it the best chapter of her life. If you liked this, hit like and subscribe, and check out our videos.